Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to you by the Which Side Media Collective store. All month long, gift cards are 25% off if you use promo code GIFTCARD25. So if you're looking to buy something in the future even, and you want to save a little bit of money, or even if you wanted to buy something now and you wanted 25% off of it, technically you could just go buy a gift card and then use that gift card that same day to buy something else.
Oh yeah, you could totally do it. You get the gift card immediately.
Hashtag loophole.
Hashtag loophole. Because fuck capitalism.
Yeah.
Who are these capitalist pigs trying to make money on the internet?
So just use gift card 25 as your promo code and get 25% off gift cards all month long.
Didn't mean to shame actual pigs, sorry.
Yeah, that's not cool.
This is episode 214.
Yeah, we talked with Lori Marino.
Yeah, Lori is part of a team who's actually building a whale sanctuary. A fucking whale sanctuary. I let's let that sink in for a second. Yeah. It's that cool. So stick tuned for that. It's a fascinating conversation. She does a lot of other advocacy work. Hey Jordan, what news and events are going on?
On January 20th, there is a general strike happening at the nation's capital in the United States. If you can attend that, you should do so. Or you can find something in your own neck of the woods.
What's significant about January 20th?
I don't know. Maybe some guy.
Some guy.
Some guy's doing something in the White House. I don't know. This week's listener shout-out comes from Charlotte Malrich. Charlotte said that we could shout out whatever we want, so this week we're gonna shout out to prisoners in prison.
That's usually where they're at.
Yeah. So write a prisoner.
If you need a list of prisoners to write, head on over to whichsidepodcast.com or just do a quick search. There's tons of fantastic lists available.
There's a website that's currently beta testing called prisonersolidarity.net. You should check that out, as well as maybe a local anarchist Black Cross.
And, consider writing a prisoner outside of your normal scope. So if you normally write an liberation prisoner, throw in somebody else as well. Or if you normally only do, anarchist prisoners, throw in animal rights prisoner as well. Just, get out of your general comfort zone and throw in everyone, because they all need our support.
I really hope you enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
So, how's your day going so far?
Good. Very good. Just been busy talking with different people about, from British Columbia, about the Whale Sanctuary Project. And no rest for the weary.
So, are you just like on a media blitz right now?
Pretty much, yes. I've been doing a lot of interviews. And what is that has done is caused a lot of attention to be focused on the Whale Sanctuary Project. And from that, we get all kinds of people calling and emailing saying, I know a good spot, or I know someone you should contact. So it really is a good way to make contacts on the ground and in the local communities.
So have you been dealing with any super stupid questions besides this one?
Actually, no, not really. The biggest question we get is, why can't you just release them into the wild and watch them off into the sunset? And that's not a stupid question. That's an understandable question. But the answer is that, most of these whales don't know how to survive in the wild, and they wouldn't know how. And it would be very dangerous for them just to be, dumped back in the ocean. So we want to do the next best thing, which is provide an environment where they can live close to nature, but still be cared for.
So let's take a step back. And what was the actual origin? Like, where did this whole idea come from?
Well, I think the origin of the idea of a sanctuary, a permanent sanctuary on the coast for marine mammals, has been sort of a glimmer in a lot of people's eyes for a long time. But this particular project really got off the ground very recently, as last year. And we've had a couple of meetings, and the project is really so new that we only incorporated in April of this year. I would say that the real the point at which the watershed moment was in 2013 when Blackfish came out, and the tide started to really shift against keeping dolphins and whales in concrete tanks and having them perform for food. And we're still sort of riding that wave. It's still a shifting public opinion. And the public is getting less and less tolerant of keeping these animals in that way. Enter the Whale Sanctuary Project, which is an alternative. It's a way to provide an alternative to seeing them stuck in concrete tanks for the rest of their lives.
So what is your origin? What brought you towards animal advocacy?
Well, you could say I was born with it, but I really, I've been a neuroscientist for 25 years. I was a faculty member at Emory University. I studied the psychobiology of behavior in other animals and in humans, meaning the brain, neuroanatomy, and the evolution of the brain. And I really, I always sort of took little forays into advocacy for animals, but I would really have to say that it started probably about 12 or 13 years ago when I did a study showing that bottlenose dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors. And I did that study with Dr. Diana Reese, and we did that study with 2 dolphins who are held captive in an aquarium in Coney Island, Brooklyn. And after that study, showing that they recognize themselves in mirrors. So, you and I, we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror and we comb our hair or do whatever. And that means, that's a pretty sophisticated cognitive ability, because it shows that, we have a sense of self. We can use the mirror to check ourselves out. And not all non-human animals have that ability. Well, we showed that dolphins do. And then I started to think about, well, if you were a self-aware being, what is it like to live in a concrete tank in Coney Island, going around and around and around for years and years and years? And that one thing led to another, and I finally decided that I could no longer work with captive animals, because I began to realize that helping them was more important than getting one more line on my resume.
Mm-hmm. So what was that transition like for you, going through that realization?
Well, it happened through a series of milestones. I'd say what happened after we did that study, which really was very highly publicized, a lot of animal advocates contacted me and said, well, okay, now that you know that you're self-aware, you're just going to sit back and be happy about the fact that they're going around and around and around a concrete tank for years and years. And at the time, I guess I wasn't ready to hear that. But a couple of years later, what happened was that those 2 dolphins who we worked with were transferred to other facilities, and they died. They died young. And that hit me hard. And I realized, oh my gosh, yeah, this is not even a choice anymore. I have to do something. And then I found out about the connection between, marine parks around the world and the Taiji, Japan dolphin murders. And once I saw, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but if you see a videotape of what happens every year in Taiji, Japan, where they slaughter hundreds of dolphins, you're never the same after that. And at that point, I began to realize that I needed to use my scientific expertise, not just to understand these animals scientifically, but to help them.
Yeah, the Taiji is crazy to see if you've never seen it.
Yeah. If you've seen The Cove, you've seen it. It's that The Cove shows it. It's so much worse than what is shown in The Cove, but if you watch The Cove, you get the idea. Mm-hmm. Get the idea. And so, it was a combination of that happening, those 2 deaths, seeing, what happens in Taiji, Japan, and realizing the connection to, captive theme parks and aquariums around the world. Decided that I really needed to do something, and I never looked back after that. So that's how it all went down.
So do you see any other people in a similar profession making that same connection, or do you have that kind of dialogue with any of them?
Well, I think that not enough people in the sciences make that connection, or if they do, not enough of them feel enough that they can do anything about it. It's a continual source of frustration that, most of my scientific colleagues, particularly in the marine mammal community, just don't want to touch any advocacy issues. They just feel that they're there to do the science, and advocacy is for somebody else. But my feeling and my point is that hi, somebody wants to join the conversation. My point is that actually advocacy is for scientists. In fact, scientists make the best advocates because they know the most about the animals they're advocating for.
Do you see it kind of like the same criticisms that that Jane Goodall got with inside the scientific community?
Yes. In other words, you're either going to do science or you're going to do advocacy, but you're not going to do both. And one is, the science is somehow compromised by the advocacy, which is really ridiculous, because if you're a scientist and you continue to publish in the peer-reviewed literature, which I have for years and continue to, I subject all of my work to the review of my peers in the scientific community. If they don't like what I'm doing, or if they don't like my conclusions, my paper is never going to see the light of day. So that's sort of a straw man. I have to say that the other thing that really made me want to create a way to do science advocacy, which is what it is. It's scholar advocacy, being a scholar and being an advocate at the same time, was the students at Emory. And I saw for years students who were compassionate about animals, didn't want to do vivisection, didn't want to do this or that, and were forced to do things. And we're told, well, you can't be a neuroscientist unless you cut up animals in so many words. And this was really disturbing to me, because it's just not true.
So how does one go about becoming a neuroscientist without actually partaking in the standard vivisection?
Well, for instance, there's a lot of work that is done using non-invasive techniques like imaging techniques, and I've done most of my comparative neuroscience work in that realm, using postmortem materials from dolphins who have passed away. I can do magnetic resonance imaging and different types, different forms of that, where we can image the brain, we can measure the brain, we can do all kinds of things. You can also use computed tomography to study the fossils, fossil crania, which we did, and we discovered a lot of things about how the brain inside the cranium changed over tens of millions of years. There is a lot you can do without having to harm a healthy individual. And there's absolutely no reason why you have to do vivisection if you want to do, comparative neuroscience. Sure, there are some questions we can't answer that would require, drilling a hole in their heads and recording from parts of their brain or taking out parts of their brain. We're just not going to do that, and we're not going to answer those questions, and that's fine. There are plenty of other questions to be answered that don't necessitate you, cutting up and killing another animal.
One of the things that has always struck me that when you take things like economics and you're doing and setting up studies, there's a lot of studies that they won't perform because to actually perform them would be unethical. But similar studies done on animals, they're completely okay with. Yeah. That's the thing. I've being in a psychology department for a long time at Emory, it's astounding how different it is. Obviously, there is a committee, an ethics committee, that oversees both human and non-human research. And the non-human, and on the side of the human research, especially when it has to do with children, there's the bar is set really high. Sometimes, it's set so high that it just seems ridiculous, but I'm very glad that, we have those ethical, regulations, because somebody has to protect research subjects. But when it comes to non-humans, all bets are off. It's that the things that you can do to them are just incredible. And even though there is a committee, an institutional animal use and care committee that oversees all projects coming from the university, they're not there to really question the ethics of it. They're there to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and that, all of the Animal Welfare Act regulations are adhered to, but they never question the bigger picture, which is, should we be doing this? So they make sure that the monkey, who's having his brain dissected or is being given Parkinson's disease, has enough food and water and a cage that meets regulation standards, but they never question whether this is ethically appropriate to do to a living being. So there's really no checks. There's no checks on those kinds of things.
Do your views ever cause conflict with some of your colleagues?
Sure, they do. But at the same time, even when I was at Emory, where they have the Yerkes Regional Primate Center there, and I did do some work there, behavioral work with chimpanzees many years ago. My opinions about these issues do differ. At the same time, I think that you have to be respectful in your discourse. And in fact, for many years, I was part of the faculty of the Emory Center for Ethics. And I was asked to be part of that center because I was willing to sort of go there and engage in dialogue with people at Yerkes, people who do animal research, and really discuss with them, how things can change. You're not going to change things by, throwing tomatoes at people. You're going to change things by having conversation. You still are going to have your own principles, but I've always I've always treated my faculty colleagues, even those who do some pretty horrific, invasive stuff, with respect, as I would want to be treated.
When did you decide that you wanted to go down this career path and get into being an expert on animal behavior and intelligence?
Oh, I think from the very beginning, from the time I was a college student. I studied psychobiology, and I was very interested at that time in perceptual systems in other animals. How do animals see and hear, and how is that different from the way we see and hear? Sort of one thing led to another. Most careers don't go in a straight line, they zigzag. And I've always kind of followed just, my instincts. And it's interesting because I did do some work on rats at Rockefeller University and at NYU, where I went to school. And that was invasive work. And it bothered me. And I decided that I wasn't going to go down that road. I couldn't, do that kind of invasive work with other animals. So, it's sort of one area shut off, another area opened up, and I ended up doing work with humans and working for the space program, NASA, for a few years, studying space adaptation syndrome, which is about how animals, perceptual systems evolve and adapt. Only the animals that I was studying were astronauts. So I went from there to eventually go back to non-human animals, who I find a lot more interesting than most human animals, and decided to go back and work with someone who was doing work with primates. And from there on in, I just stayed the course in terms of studying comparative issues, comparing species.
What advice would you give to animal advocates fighting against the cruel practices of vivisection, from your insider perspective of what works? Like what kind of advice would you give to those activists?
Well, a lot of things work, but I would the big piece of advice I would give is know what you're talking about. Educate yourself, use the science. I mean, that's really what is going to be the most powerful tool. Yes, there are, you can go on the sidewalk and you can carry signs, and that has its place. But I feel that, scholar advocacy, the kind that I advocate for and that my organization, the Camella Center, supports, has more to do with matching knowledge with knowledge, credentials with credentials. If you want to be the best advocate for non-human animals, learn the science, learn what the science says, wield the peer-reviewed scientific literature, because that's what I've noted is the most formidable way to argue with other scientists, is to be a scientist or have the science at your fingertips.
What are some common mistakes that you see when you say know the science that advocates make with not knowing the science, that kind of makes their argument almost get not even looked at?
Well, I think if you're overly emotional and you disregard the science and you start hammering people over the head, that doesn't work. If you take adversarial positions without really understanding what you're asking for, I've seen that doesn't work. I've seen advocates, get up there and just get completely creamed by, the other side, as it were, because they just didn't know about what happens in terms of the science, why things happen the way they do in the science. And they also didn't have any data to back up what they were saying. I mean, it's one thing for me to say, I don't like seeing killer whales in concrete tanks. And I could say that till the cows come home. But the fact is that who cares what my opinion is? The fact is that I have the scientific evidence that shows that these animals do really poorly in concrete tanks. And that's where the power is, not in my opinion about it, but in what the science says. So you match science for science. And that's what I tell people, even, young people, even people who are not scientists can still read the literature and talk to scientists and be armed with the data.
So going back to the whale sanctuary, just looking at the team you've put together of so many people of very diverse and strong backgrounds, it's very impressive. But can you tell us a bit about that team of people and how you work together?
Oh my gosh. So this is a team of people. There's about 45 of us at this point. And, we are colleagues, friends, but most of all, these are people who I think of as the A team, really a dream team of experts, of the kinds of expertise that you would need to do something like this. And that includes people who know how to, they know about husbandry and training of killer whales and beluga whales, marine mammal veterinarians, marine mammal advocates, engineers, people who are expert in law and policy. It's if you sort of think of it as a number of different areas of paths of expertise all converging on one project, because that project has many facets to it and it requires expertise in a wide range of areas. But we have that. And, I just can't tell you enough how important that is to have the very best people on your team. Because no matter what, this is a team project. It's a team effort. No one person can pull it off. So, and I think we have the best team. We have, veterinarians and marine mammal experts and people who know the policies and the law, engineers who know how to build this thing, and everything else in between.
So what are some of the roadblocks that you're facing in getting this project done? I don't really see any roadblocks at this point. I mean, obviously we have some major tasks ahead of us and major tasks that we are engaged in right now. The biggest task is to find a site, is to do site selection, is to look for the best place to put a shovel in the ground. And we are engaged in that process right now. We have been for many months and will continue until probably early mid next year, where we'll have a short list of sites that will then sort of take to the next level. And we've been looking, in Nova Scotia, we've been looking in British Columbia, we've been looking in Washington State. And out of that, we are refining our list, and will come, a short list of maybe 10 or 15 sites across all of those areas that eventually will get whittled down to the site, which we hope we'll be able to do by, the end of next year. So that's simply a task that involves, reviewing the data, analyzing the data, talking to people, doing all of the data crunching and analysis, going to see these places, and we're doing all that. The other major task is, of course, funding. And we've been very fortunate. We have a major funder from the beginning, the Munchkin Corporation, which is a California-based baby product company, and they've
funded this first phase of the project, and they've pledged over $1 million to the project. And of course, this project is going to cost more than $1 million. But having them behind us and having other, donors online, just, it's allowed us to move forward at a really good pace. And so I would say site selection and, fundraising, obviously. But we think that, once we choose a site, then there will be, a lot of interest in wherever we end up.
So what does the sanctuary look like?
Well, the sanctuary itself would be a bay or a cove or an inlet that would be netted off. And by a net, I mean more than a tennis net. It would be a net that was made of special material that was anchored to the bottom. That would allow water to flow through it, fish to come in and out, and so forth, but would not allow, dolphins and whales to go out or come in. And it would be at least 70 square acres and have a certain depth of at least, 15, 20, about 40 feet, 40, 50 feet. 15, 20 meters. And so basically it would be an enclosed area, but it would be continuous with the natural setting. And then on the land part, we'd have facilities for caring and feeding the animals and for making all of this run. And then eventually what we would really like, which I'm very excited about, would be an educational program, an on-site visitor interpretive center, someplace where people can come and learn about why these animals belong in the wild.
So is the plan to have it be self-sufficient as far as being cash neutral, or is it always going to be relied upon donors?
We're always going to rely upon donors. I mean, we are right now engaged in strategic planning, and people who know about this kind of thing are, sort of building the infrastructure so that we can make this sustainable. But of course, we feel that, even though the initial cost of about $20 million is somewhat high, it really isn't when you compare it to, what is spent on, other kinds of animal facilities around the world. So, and we won't actually, have the first resident in the site until we know that we can care for that individual and follow through on that. Because obviously, once we have a whale or whales, that's a big responsibility, and we want to make sure that we can take care of that individual or those individuals for the rest of their lives. And sometimes that could be, 20, 30, 40 years.
So you think you said the initial cost is about $20 million?
Yes.
That seems ridiculously low to me. That's really impressive to be able to pull it off for that amount of money.
We don't think it's very high. I mean, considering, right?
Yeah.
Really, when we've costed this out, and I think $20 million to cut the ribbon on this with, a couple of lucky bluegills or orca whales. We're very confident in that. And then obviously, then we will need a way to make that sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Is the end goal to rehabilitate them back into the wild, or is that just not something that can happen at this point?
No, our end goal is really to provide a place where they can retire in a natural setting where their autonomy, their choices, their freedom is, to the best that we can do, is respected. We'll still need to feed them. We'll still to do veterinary care, all kinds of things like that. But we're going to put them in a situation that's as close as possible to their natural setting. That's what authentic sanctuaries do. And it will be a qualitative shift in their well-being from where they currently live now, which is in these small concrete tanks.
What?
If the idea of rehab and release is not off the table in principle, and we'll take that on a case-by-case basis and see how each individual does. We certainly wouldn't want to hold them back if we saw that they were good candidates for rehab and release. But it's really important to know that, we are building a permanent sanctuary because 99% of all the individuals who are currently in concrete tanks are not candidates for release.
Is that because, for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much domesticated at this point?
They're not domesticated, but what they are lacking the skills that they need to survive. Dolphins and whales in the wild spend a very long period of time growing up learning their culture, their communication system, how to survive, how to catch food. They depend upon their social group for support for just about everything. In concrete tanks, that's taken away from them. They lose the ability to hunt or even, the desire to hunt. Their social groups are broken up. They have no experience traveling or diving, and everything is taken away from them. And if you have an individual who is born in captivity, they never get that experience. And those who were taken from their natural setting and, were taken when they were little, 2, 3, 4 years old. And if they've been, in a tank for 20, 30, 40 years, it would be question as to whether they'd be able to survive. In principle, we would love to see that happen for many of the older orcas, for instance, and beluga whales that are currently in captivity. But we're a very conservative group, and we're not going to do anything that's going to put the animals at risk.
So what's the plan of getting these animals from these facilities?
Well, the plan is to continue to build this facility and to get to the point where it becomes a reality. Because I think that we are now at a point where even though, a lot of people would like to see these animals come out of concrete tanks, there really is nowhere for them to go. So that's the bottleneck. And we want to replace that with an alternative, a viable alternative. And so I think as we move towards that viable alternative, that it will become easier for the captivity community to see that it really can be a reality. We have always maintained that we are willing to work with any facility that wants to work with us towards the same goal. This is not about closing down SeaWorld or this world or that world or marine this and that. It is about finding a better way to relate to these animals and to give them back what was taken from them. And I think any facility that keeps these animals now, who, that wants to work with us, we will come to the table and work with them. And I think that in a couple of years, that's going to be the case, because I think everyone sees the writing on the wall.
So what's been your most rewarding experience with working with animals?
Oh my gosh. Everything about working with them, but there's the thing is that it's frustrating too, because you realize that when you're working with them in a lot of settings, particularly in science, you're not working with them as an equal. You're working with them as someone who walks away at the end of the day and goes home, and they stay in a cage. I worked at Yerkes for a couple of years, and I worked with chimpanzees and did behavioral work with them, and it bothered me because as I got to know the individuals, it was, I felt ashamed that at the end of the day, again, I get to take off my white lab coat, go home, and I can go to the movies or hang out with friends, and the individuals that I were working with had to stay in that cage on that hard concrete floor. So there's nothing enjoyable about that. What's enjoyable is just, getting to know who these individuals are and just the astonishing intelligence and sensitivity that they can show. So, I have to say the animals themselves, amazing. How we are forced to interact with them in the science world, not so amazing.
What kind of responses have you gotten from other scientists and experts about your project?
Well, we have a lot of scientists and experts on our team, so obviously they are all for it. There's a number of marine mammal experts and veterinarians who are on our team, and they obviously understand that this is something that has to happen for these animals, and it's the best life we can give them. And there's been generally a really good positive response. However, that positive response hasn't been universal, and those of my colleagues in the marine mammal world who depend upon doing work with aquariums and animals in concrete tanks are not so sanguine about it, not so happy about it, because they feel threatened by it. So it's everything from I'm going to join your team and make this happen to, I don't think this is a good idea, and everything in between.
What are some good resources for activists on combating the confinement of marine animals?
Well, there are a number of good resources. I mean, obviously, any resource that offers you information is going to be a good one. What we have an organization called the Camella Center for Animal Advocacy, and that organization is set up to promote scholar advocacy. So what we do is we use the science towards advocacy for animals. We are not protesters. We're not trying to shut anybody down or storm the Bastille. We are scientists and scholars who are using the scientific data to make arguments that are advocacy arguments for other animals. And we have a scholar advocacy program for young people, and they can go to our website, www.camella.org, and check that out. They can also, email me, and I would be happy to advise anyone who wants to take this route of scholar advocacy for other animals. I advise students from all over the world on a continual basis. There's some very good organizations out there, like the Performing Animal Welfare Society. There's the Animal Welfare Institute. There's ZooCheck, Born Free Foundation. These are all really reputable organizations that have scientists working with them and do really good work.
How do you feel your life has changed since you actually became an advocate?
Oh my gosh, it is complete. I mean, it's changed for the better. I mean, it really, when you talk about, having a purpose in life, there's no greater purpose than helping others. And when you finally realize how you want to do that, it's a wonderful feeling. 10, 15 years ago, I was starting to approach that point in mid-career where, I really had all the scientific credibility and all of that, and I realized, I could just continue for the next 20, 30 years and, create more pages on my curriculum vitae, or I can do something that's going to make a difference. And that's when I decided that not to give up my science, because I'm still publishing, but to use it and to use that as a platform and as a tactic for helping the other animals. So at the end of the day, it's not just that you know something or you get a scientific accolade, but you're actually doing something to change lives. And in this case, the lives of non-human animals. So, as I said, I never look back. I mean, it is the most rewarding way to spend your days, I think.
I'm curious, since you've worked with animals for a long time, do you have any examples of animals and their behavior and intelligence that most people aren't aware of?
Well, it's interesting because when I worked with dolphins, bottlenose dolphins in captivity, in concrete tanks while I was a graduate student and earlier in my career, the thing that struck me about those folks is that they really process information at a much quicker level than we do. And you kind of know that because when you look at their, the nerves that go to their brain and you see how big they are and how fast, their nerve transmission is and all of that's neuroanatomical stuff. That's one thing. But when you're working with someone and they are picking up on what you're doing in a way that is shockingly quick, it really makes you humble. It makes you realize that, you might be the scientist and he's the research subject, but that has nothing to do with, the who's more intelligent than who, or and so forth. They are, engaged. They are forming hypotheses about what you want to do with them in terms of the study that you're doing. They're checking out different ways to do it. They're so fast, so lightning fast. They're always a step ahead of you. And that's something that, is really, that struck me working with them in these settings. And, the other thing that really struck me is when I did some field research off the coast of Georgia studying bottlenose dolphins, when I first saw them in the wild, it seemed to me like they were completely different animals than the ones that I knew from the concrete tanks. They are just completely different. I really didn't get to know what a dolphin, a real dolphin was like until I saw them in the wild. And then I realized, okay, that's who they are. And so, there really is a tremendous difference in terms of who they are, depending upon whether they're, in a cage or a tank, or whether they're being, just who they are out in the wild doing their thing, doing whatever they're doing.
Can you expand on that difference a little bit, like what that difference in behavior is between being in the tank and in the wild?
Sure. In captivity, certainly, and this is true with, chimpanzees, with dolphins in concrete tanks, with elephants, any wild animals that you're keeping and confining. The thing that you realize is that first of all, especially for, animals like chimpanzees and dolphins and elephants, they get it. They know that they realize that they're in there and you're out there. And that sets up a level of inequality that's very, very, very difficult to deal with. You can be as nice to them and as engaging to them as possible, but at the end of the day, as I said, they know they're in there and they know you're out there and you can leave. So there is that sort of implicit acknowledgement that you have with these kinds of animals when you're working with them. But there is also, in the wild, they don't seem to be, they really are not as eager to be with you, to get something from you. If you're a dolphin in a tank and you're swimming around and around and around, you might be eager to be engaged in a research project just because it's something different to do. I used to do computer with the chimpanzees. They used to use a joystick and they would do computer games, and we learned something about how their minds worked. And many of them would be very eager just because it's something to do, and they know they're going to get a reward and some social interaction. And, obviously in the natural setting, they're not as desperate for that. And that just changes their whole demeanor.
I've even experienced that a little bit. I visited some spider monkeys in a sanctuary, and they seemed very desperate for attention as well. But they were super sweet. I loved them.
Oh, they're wonderful. That's the thing. Some of them get very desperate for any kind of stimulation because they're bored out of their minds. Some of them retreat and don't want anything to do with you and are actually hostile. I saw that at Yerkes when I worked with the chimpanzees. I had some chimpanzees who were friendly and always wanted to hang out and do stuff with me, and there were others who couldn't wait for me to come by so they could pelt me with feces and poop and really were not happy about me being there. Mm-hmm. And the important thing for everyone to note is these are individuals, so they have individual lives, individual histories, and so they're all going to react differently to their circumstances, just like humans do.
So I've done about 5 minutes of cursory research on dolphins in my lifetime, and I've come to the very non-scientific conclusion that they're the assholes of the sea. So can you give me the science to back that up?
Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of animals are assholes, right? Talk about assholes. Chimpanzees can be real assholes. Our species is the biggest asshole of all, right?
Yeah, very true.
So here's the thing, and it's really interesting you mentioned that, because, sure, they can be assholes, and why not? Why shouldn't they be? When dolphins, there is this lore out there that dolphins, are sort of like these New Age mythical angels of the sea, and they have a higher level of morality than us, and they love us, and they love everything, and et cetera, et cetera. And that goes back thousands of years. The fact is that dolphins are big-brained predators. They have very complex social lives, and they're just very complex beings. So what you can expect from them is a lot of complex behavior. And some of that behavior is going to be stuff that we think of as, wonderful. And some of that behavior is not going to be so wonderful. When they first found that there were dolphins who were killing porpoises at the Moray Firth off Scotland, where there's some dolphins that they take these little porpoises and flip them up in the air, and they apparently are doing this not to eat them, they're just doing it out of fun, and it's horrific to watch. And a lot of advocates said, oh no, that can't be, I'm sorry, they didn't want to go there. The fact is that you have to go there if you want to know who you're advocating for. And it is no surprise that an animal with a brain like a bottlenose dolphin is going to be capable of a variety of different ways of behaving. And they're not just going to be these floating little angels in the sea. Part of what made them smart is competition and some of the characteristics that made us smart. And the same with chimpanzees. They can be really, really nasty, and they can be really, really sweet. And and you wouldn't expect anything less from such magnificently complex beings.
Well, I can't believe we're already almost at an hour. Would you mind telling people how they can get involved with the project, help out, and just keep up with the updates?
Yeah, well, they certainly can go to our website at www.whalesanctuaryproject.org. We have updates on there all the time. They can check out the whole team. We have bios of different team members, our board of directors. We have monthly newsletters. We've, all kinds of great stories, not just about us, but about things happening in the marine mammal captivity world that are really moving things in a progressive way, moving things in the right direction. They can email us. They can go on the Facebook and comment. So we're very, very open to folks just getting in touch with us and asking us questions and contributing whatever they feel that they can contribute. And, we're just really grateful for all the support we've gotten so far.
This week you heard
We Travel by Marconi Union.
Right now you're listening to
Floating World by Manuel.
iTunes. Every week we're going to say this pretty much forever, because it's important. So iTunes, when you finish listening to this episode, or any episode for that matter, just, go rate and review us. If you've already done it, my hat's off to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you've already done it, my hat's off to you. Thank you so much. You're already helping out the show. If you haven't done it, please consider it. It doesn't cost you anything but a minute of your time. And it's a fantastic way of saying, hey, I appreciate you guys spending so much fucking time creating this free content for us that I'm consuming and not supporting. But if you do the review, it's your way of supporting it.
So we're going to shame you into supporting us because it helps with the other people finding us who might actually support us.
Shame on you. Can we make up like a good street chant for it?
I mean, I'd go with the shame, shame, shame from...
Oh, you want to do the shame, shame, shame? I was going to say, what do we want? A review. When do we want it? Now. You got another one?
We know where you live.
we know... We don't.
Be our friend on social media. If you're not yet our friend, you should be. Because we post about things on there all the time that we don't talk about on the show. News and events and current information. A lot of shit happens during the course of a week. And so just follow us. Be our friend. We respond back to if you talk to us because we're nice like that.
10.
Or at least I will.
I was going to say 10. That's the average amount of shits I take a week.
Really? Just 10?
Yeah, about 10. Yeah.
I mean, I average about one a day. But
I'm usually 1.5-er. 2 days.
These last few days, I was like 5 times in one day. I was like, what did I eat? Chili, I think.
Sounds good. I want to make some chili tonight.
Fuck shit, damn. All right.
Witchside Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Witchside Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to witchsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.